And I agree that that's why the ancient myths look to December 25th, because of that symbolism. I also agree that that's why you shouldn't take Jesus' birth on December 25th literally. But this doesn't discredit Christianity, because follow me here for a minute before you think I'm being a heretic. Nowhere in Christianity does it say Jesus was born on December 25th. Nowhere. This belief isn't in the Bible. It's a tradition that was added 4 centuries later, and it was borrowed from paganism, no doubt about it. His birth was more likely October, probably around the Feast of Tabernacles. It was an attempt, right or wrong, in the 1st century to replace a pagan holiday with a Christian one. But that's really besides the point, because it's not Christian. December 25th has nothing to do with Christianity. Maybe if the Bible taught December 25th, I'd give them a reaction they're looking for, of going, oh man, this is all plagiarized from paganism. But again, this says nothing about Christian belief being myth, because that was never a part of Christian belief. As a simple understanding of chronology will tell you. And in case you're thinking, yeah, but what about the 3 kings? The Bible only says, firstly, that there were magi who saw a glowing, probably the Shekinah glory, but they weren't kings. We have no idea how many there were. 3, there's nothing about 3 in the Bible. They didn't go to the birth, and the constellation called the 3 kings wasn't named that till centuries after. Okay? After the Nativity. It was named after the story, not the other way around. And they knew this. That's why they just kind of alluded to it and said it's called the 3 kings since ancient times. Now, it does point to the sun's rise or birth on December 25th, but that only explains why pagan religions revered that date. Christianity never did. Never. We just added that as a later thing. Nothing to do with Christianity. It's like we have these ancient myths on the one hand and Christianity on the other, and these guys are saying, look, see, they're one and the same. But we're saying, first of all, the likenesses on the myth hand simply aren't part of the myths, and the likenesses that are left in Christianity were never actually part of Christianity, and we're left with no likenesses at all. We can take Jesus' birth literally, absolutely, but December 25th, that's not part of Christianity. That says nothing about the linking up of these things. Add to this that Jesus' story is set in an historical context, which no myth ever is, by the way, and their conclusion that he never existed becomes shakier and shakier. Now, these are 1st century Greek documents in the New Testament. They weren't written centuries after the event. Some of them were written 2 to 5 years after, some 10, while people were still alive who could be checked out to see if this was true. And these claim that he was born in the days of Caesar Augustus, tried under Pilate, crucified on a Roman cross. It gives dates and world leaders. Myths don't do that. They make up falcon-headed gods and that sort of thing. Okay? The Gospels invite us, practically beg us to investigate this stuff for ourselves. This is so different, so far removed from mythological literature that they should never be placed in the same genre together. It's equally absurd to think that the 1st century Jewish culture, which viewed paganism as evil, would ever even have tried to make their Messiah a sun god. That bucket simply wouldn't have held water in the 1st century in that culture. Later on, yes, Jesus was likened to the zodiac. Pagan symbols were adapted to become Christian symbols, including the cross with the circle. They're right about that, okay? But of course, that says nothing about Jesus being a myth. And it's a bizarre jump to make that conclusion. Chronologically absurd. So, are there any likenesses left at all? Let me hit play again. We've got about another 5 minutes or so to go.
A plagiarization of the Egyptian sun god Horus. For example, inscribed about 3,500 years ago on the walls at the Temple of Luxor in Egypt are images of the Annunciation,
and again,
the Immaculate Conception,
I'll just interrupt
the
while
birth,
it's going on,
and the adoration of Horus.
That's reading Christian
The images begin with Thoth
language
announcing to the Virgin Isis that she
back
will
onto
conceive
hieroglyphics
Horus.
that weren't Christian.
Then Neph, the Holy Ghost, impregnating the Virgin. And then the virgin birth and the adoration.
That's not what those hieroglyphics are
This
saying.
is exactly the story of Jesus' miracle conception.
Most watchers of that can't pick that up. It's highlighting a few minor parts of a story and completely missing the main parts of Horus's story. Okay.
Literary similarities between the Egyptian religion and the Christian religion are staggering.
All right, I slowed that list down because I thought, man, if there are that many likenesses, you know, they may have a point. Here's what I read as I slowed them down. Horus was a beetle, Jesus was a beetle. Horus had a golden complexion, Jesus had a golden complexion. What? They're just making this stuff up. But you scroll it fast enough and people won't stop to actually see it. Jesus is a mouse, a cat, had children. This is what was listed there. Then it made this likeness.
Is continuous. The story of Noah and Noah's Ark is taken directly from tradition. The concept of the Great Flood is ubiquitous throughout the ancient world, with over 200 cited claims in different periods and times. However, one need look no further for a pre-Christian source than the Epic of Gilgamesh, written in 2600 BC. This story talks of a great flood commanded by God, an ark with saved animals upon it, and even the release and return of a dove, all held in common with the biblical story, among many other similarities.
All right. Does that discredit the Bible's claims that there was other accounts of a flood? No, it actually lends weighty support. If there was a catastrophic flood, it stands to reason that other cultures recorded it too. Okay, these sorts of likenesses aren't proofs of plagiarism, they're proofs of authenticity. Which brings us to the last likeness that these guys think is damning to Christianity, but I find it pretty cool. Listen to this one.
Within the book itself. In the Old Testament, there is the story of Joseph. Joseph was a prototype for Jesus. Joseph was born of a miracle birth. Jesus was born of a miracle birth. Joseph was of 12 brothers. Jesus had 12 disciples. Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver. Jesus was sold for 30 pieces of silver. Brother Judah suggests the sale of Joseph. Disciple Judas suggests the sale of Jesus. Joseph began his work at the age of 30. Jesus began his work at the age of 30. The parallels go on and on. Furthermore, is there any
People will interpret the same evidence in different ways. They look at that likeness between Joseph and Jesus, for example, and they see plagiarism. I look at it and see, to use their words, a prototype, foreshadowing of Christ. I guess I'm biased in saying that, okay, but no more than they are. The question, as we've said before, is not who is biased and who isn't, but which bias is the best bias with which to be biased.